And if people don't know the rules of the game, then I think the ethics are hard to have a discussion about, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, knowing and understanding the power and the capability of CRISPR Cas9 as an example, as it relates to the success rate of a genome edit, is something that we don't ever talk about. We talk
Mm.
about the ethics all the time, but I think that it's important to know if the ethics are at question, then we should also know, more about the success rate. So it's like exactly how you said, could we? Well, could we? Yes, but how many times is it going to take before we actually successfully do it? I don't know. And is that detrimental to the human? If someone is someone suffering because a therapy needs to be successful before it gets transfused back in, and we don't have the ability to do that, and that person's taking a CRISPR, based therapy like this, when they could have taken a cocktail of chemotherapeutics that would be obsolete, but give them a chance to survive faster. That's a question we need to think about, right? I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
all these dilemmas with these things, and an oncologist's job is getting more and more complicated because bedside manner is filled with these types of juxtapositions. And if someone's emotionally charged up because their loved one has cancer, for example, how do you parse through that and explain that to somebody? Is there ethical problems with giving them a therapy that might be more precise but less efficient
Mm-hmm.
relative to something that could be more detrimental but more successful? It's hard to know. And so, you want to give people more information and less than rather than, too little. And there's a side of that that's ethically problematic too, because, if someone's gone through the training and the exercise of understanding why they've decided to give the therapy to that person, the answer can't just be trust me, right? It has to be
Yes.
it has to be some sort of, halfway ground so that everybody understands why the doctor's doing that.
Yeah, 100%. When I think you said like the bedside manner piece, like that really kind of hits home because ultimately that's where these things will land, right? Like we can talk about all the millions of billions and hundreds of thousands of whatever experiments that are run to figure out these kind of treatments and these kind of therapies, but ultimately it comes down to, let's say, that like the doctor sitting next to you with your loved one who has cancer or whatever else it might be, and trying to explain these very complex, very difficult conversations where, like you were saying, it's you're trying to compare like, well, one's more efficient, but you're going to have X, Y, and Z. Like you're going to struggle with all of these kind of other side effect things, and it's a really really difficult conversation. And I mean, I one that I like you said, like you and I probably aren't going to solve all these issues today,
No, but I mean,
unfortunately.
diagnosing them is important.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%. Like I said, having these kind of conversations, I think, is really really critical, and having the conversations between like folks like yourself that are extremely well versed in these kind of topics with somebody like me who's maybe not quite so much, to help get the word out a little bit and help people to understand a little bit more what's happening in the world, particularly on cutting edge science. But I want to pivot here a little bit because you and I were talking off air, about some of the things like when it comes down to science where you're kind of mentioning where some folks think that you have to go to like certain kinds of schools in order to achieve certain levels of scientific discovery or scientific experimentation. Can you just speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah. So in my own journey, I went to Berkeley as an undergrad and
Mm,
experienced a lot of success in the lab. And the thing about working in high profile laboratories at Berkeley is that you meet incredible postdocs and PhD students, and the postdocs, in my opinion, were just incredible there. And that's because they were the top of the top of their PhD programs. They
mm,
crushed it with their ability to do great science. And so it was interesting because those folks become professors and they go on and they do great things. And oftentimes, in my case, the folks that were in my cohort in the lab were they went to the Ivy League, they went to MIT, they were Johns Hopkins for
mm,
professors, and that I was asked by a couple of those folks, one of those folks particularly, to come and work in the Ivy League as a PhD student, for him. And I ultimately was already committed to the University of Montana at that point, and I wanted to be here for my own family and for other familial stuff. And it was really it really at that point dawned on me that I believe I can do good science anywhere.
mm,
And when I got to the University of Montana, it was still the case, and I knew that, and I was successful because of a lot of the training that I experienced prior. Um, but what I really noticed wasn't that the difference in caliber of students was anything specific. It was
mm,
it was actually the ability to realize that their impact or their ability to change and impact the world was, in their opinion, different because they were here rather than at, say, Berkeley or at Harvard. And I I realized quickly that it wasn't necessarily that people weren't as good. It was that they didn't believe as much sometimes. And I think
Mm,
that what ultimately I tried to do was champion confidence and realization that we can do good work anywhere
yes.
and anyone can. And it's about being resourceful and you know what, ultimately reaching out and trying to talk to folks. If you think there's somebody at a school somewhere that you can call on to help you and collaborate with, ultimately it was a surprise anytime I said, well, let's call the teaching lab. They would work with us on this. It was always sign of in the beginning, it was surprising. I had many folks that were like, really? They do that? I'm like, yeah, they love collaboration, right? And that's why Berkeley is Berkeley. It's
Mm,
because everybody's working together all the time. I mean, the amount of support that a faculty member who's up for tenure receives when they give their tenure talk at Berkeley is incredible. The entire department, hundreds of people show up,
mm.
professors and postdocs alike, and there's this rich conversation about the science because everybody's excited to have that person among their ranks for the rest of time at that point.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately we champion that at University of Montana here. We just published a paper that saw us go across, I think, 4 or 5 different departments with a range from hardcore geneticists who are working in fruit flies to hardcore structural biologists that are working on trying to solve nasty structures of things that were for neuroscience purposes.
Mm,
And all the way to genome editing. And we used folks that were from biochemistry background all the way to the genetics to do these experiments. And the paper has been well received because of the range of folks on it. And I think that it's a testament to how any department anywhere in the United States that is known by anywhere can do great work. It does not matter where you are. I would say that the faculty at the University of Montana, as an example, are sneaky good. There's a lot of folks from really good places, and I think that the students are coming in, and it's already daunting to do a PhD or a master's program or either one of those, right?
mm-hmm.
And it's like, don't feel like you have imposter syndrome that overpowers your ability to have some confidence. Because once you learn something, in the beginning you want to be receptive, but once you learn something about something, it's like, how can I take what I've learned here, enhance it, and better collaborate? Because out there in the world, we're more connected than ever now. I think COVID, everyone shut down for COVID, but we
Yeah.
all stayed connected. And I think that it's really important to recognize that, there doesn't need to be a pandemic to reach out via email. There
Mm,
doesn't need to be this barrier mentally for folks at these schools to try and do good work. And I think that, ambition is something that should be universal.
yeah. Oh gosh, I love that. I love that. Can you just explain a little bit more to me? Like, what do you mean, like, when you say like doing good science?
Mhm.
Like, just like help me understand that a little bit better. And then
Yeah.
if anybody out there listening is maybe they're an undergrad or maybe they're thinking about going back to school to pursue like a PhD or something, right? What kind of advice would you give to those folks to say
Mhm.
like, hey, I'm thinking about going to maybe some of these less prestigious schools that you wouldn't necessarily think about as, going for like your, PhD in biology or whatever. Like, what should they be looking out for?
So for example, my PI, the professor I work for my PhD,
Yeah.
she's incredibly gifted as a scientist. And her postdoc training was at Johns Hopkins, with Geraldine Seydoux, who's one of the most reputable, famous worldwide developmental biologists in the world.
Hmm.
Katya is her name. Katya Vornino was my PI here at University of Montana.